Marshmallows are for team players, Dylan. They don't just hand them out.
Patrick Klepek, let's get into this week's episode of Severance, Season 2, Episode 4, Woes Wallow. Let's talk about what's going on in this episode. Irving wakes up in the middle of a field of ice.
Yeah.
What? The innies are outside? They're on a field trip? Anyway, they go to the top of a cliff and they see a TV screen playing a DVD. It's Seth Milchick. It's their first ever outdoor retreat and team building occurrence, or ORTBO. According to Seth, this ORTBO is in response to your desire to see the outside world. With your Audi's blessings, you'll spend the next 2 days walking the trickles, brambles, and brooks that make up the Dieter Egan National Forest. End quote. So they're like, who's Dieter Egan?
Who the fuck is Dieter Egan?
Who the hell is that? And apparently Dieter Egan was Kira's twin brother, who he wrote about in the 4th appendix in a text that could not be seen on the severed floor. So they had to go find it in a cave. Scissor Cave, what it's called. Scissor Cave. The severance and cutting, severing, Yeah, anyway, very nice. Okay. There is a very funny moment when Irv says, I wouldn't trust a word out of that mountebank's mouth.
I wouldn't trust a word out of that mountebank's mouth. Not even televisually.
Not even televisually.
Such a good line.
Irving always has a way with words. Mountebank, by the way, means charlatan, for those who don't know. But Irving's dialogue is really florid and great in the show overall.
That's what I love about that word specifically is that I know that you looked up the definition of it.
Yes.
But that his
you
delivery of it, you didn't have to. Like there's such a deliciousness to the delivery that word just kind of rolled past. It's like, I get what Irv is saying.
Yes,
like I don't gotta look it up. Like I'm good. And that's great.
Well, I'm sorry to pierce the mystique for you, Patrick.
No, it's fine. It's complimenting wonderful acting.
There is no regular opening title sequence this episode.
I had a question about that.
Yes. Now, that has only occurred 2 other times in the show's history. Season 1, Episode 1, and Season 2, Episode 1, is my understanding.
Aren't they sort of like union obligated, contractually obligated to show? So this is me going back, Patrick obsessed with Lost. So one of the things when Lost would air is that if you were a diehard fan, you kind of would half watch the opening credits to the show because they were obligated to show who was starring in the episode, but that would end up spoiling, a character we haven't seen for a while is coming back. And so I would kind of half watch the top half. And the showrunners have eventually explained we have to, we are legally obligated to show the names of the actors in the episode in the beginning, which is why they're there, even though we understand that could be seen as a spoiler for the audience. And so I just thought, I don't know if that is still true or if you've heard anything about how that stuff works across. It's just, I thought it was interesting that the show is able to sidestep that and how it's able to, because I know it's not entirely a creative choice.
Right. I don't know it well, obviously I'll say this. First of all, we are watching screeners of the show. So I don't know if the final episode is different in any way. So I want to acknowledge that that's a possibility, but obviously it's okay for them to do it the way they did because they did it. So presumably they don't
if you work in the industry,
they're
please
legally
write
required.
in. If you have any,
let us know at Decoding TVG.
Yeah.
But my understanding is it is not required to have opening credits. They do have to have credits, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which this episode does, and you see the credits at the end. But I don't think a TV show is mandated to have opening credits. But I think if you do, you must present them in a certain order. That is true. So
it might be the case that because television is edited and truncated for when it airs on an ABC like Lost did.
Right.
Hey, we don't have time for the full credits at the end, so we have to put them in the beginning. That might be the explanation.
Right. Maybe.
Because once the show ends, you want to cut to commercial and get to the next show,
but usually they have the credits at the end.
They do. That's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I'm. Yeah.
But regardless, anyway, no opening credit sequence.
Yeah, it's notable.
That is notable.
It's kind of eerie, right?
It's eerie, and it makes you feel like my impression when I saw that was, what we're seeing is not a representation of reality. Like what we're seeing is different than the normal reality of the show in some way. That was my interpretation. But maybe not. Maybe not. Again, this goes to the theory about the, everything's a simulation.
Well, it's
Yeah.
however it works out with the unions and like how they have to display actor titles for credit. It's it functions here as a creative choice that adds to the air of mystery.
Yes.
That this episode kicks off with in a way that is fundamentally like a credits usually function as a kind of a kicker. Like, oh, like something happened, like an event occurs to start the episode, the kind of an inciting event. And there is no kind of, the inciting event is they're out here, but there's something really creepy about the title card coming in and then receding. It's like, hey, let's just go back to the weirdness. And as you're trying to unpack what's happening, I thought it was very effective.
Yeah, stylistically, there's a lot of really interesting things about the episode. Like, it uses a lot of dissolves. Like
There's
a lot
some
of
great
cross-dissolve.
transitions in this episode.
Transition. Like it's like not within the typical visual style of the show.
No,
like just very different visual.
And directed by Ben Stiller. Like
yeah.
I am shocked every time I remark like that looked great, and that's not to take anything away. Like it's Ben Stiller's
this
work.
is his masterpiece. It's his masterpiece.
It's like so visually arresting and
you
different.
got to watch Escape from Dannemora, Patrick Klepek.
I know, I do. Once
Yeah.
we get through this, I'll add it to my list.
Yeah. Okay, so anyway, they are supposed to go find this appendix and learn about it together, and they see twins of themselves. They say like, Kier had a twin, so we made you to make sure you each had one as well. And we see a strange Mark-esque figure. And the way I would describe these figures is they're like uncanny valley versions of their real life counterparts, right? They don't look identical. They look like a little bit like bad CG versions.
Bad CG or what is it? The Madame Tussauds, like the wax museum.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that's where I and that's where my calling them animatronics versus a clone.
So you literally think they're robots? Like
I'm not saying they're literally robots, but I also think clone implies a semi-autonomous, like a fleshy human being. I interpreted them as like I looked at them as like wax figures that just were able to.
I see. So literally wax figures that can.
I don't know. Are they literally flesh and blood human beings as well, David? I feel like you're trying to pin me down.
That's what I'm saying.
I don't think they are.
I'm saying they're either flesh and blood human beings or they're clones. But either way, the way that these people react around them is not. I guess like they're in general far enough. Other than the Dylan one, is like so. He looks like he's like 20 feet away from them. Like I'd want to go and like inspect it and talk to it. And,
and the show blurs. Like the show never gives you at any point, like whether it's in the waterfall sequence or when they see, and you're never given like a good look at them.
Yeah,
it's always at an odd angle, slightly blurred.
Exactly. But I think what I'm saying is like the way these innies behave around them just doesn't feel realistic to me, but whatever.
Yes.
There is some fun stuff about the innies. This is their first time out in the world. So they're like,
I guess this is what dead stuff looks like.
Yeah, I guess maybe this is what dead stuff looks like. I knew there was like, a sky or there's something above this, like they've never seen the sky before, right? Like, so it's fun to kind of see them react to that. But then weirdly, like the clones, they don't really have a big reaction to. It just makes no sense to me. Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, so they're wandering through the woods. They find the book, or they're reading, from the appendix, and they learn that they're to walk in Dieter's footsteps and find Woes Wallow. And what happens is they read from the book, and essentially you learn that Kier had to listen to he had no choice but to listen to his brother spilt his lineage upon the soil. So he was listening to his brother masturbate, and that was a very unpleasant experience. They find this dead thing that's really weird. It looks like a seal that has been embalmed, right? Did you have an interpretation of what that was?
No, just that I was upset.
Yeah,
it
looked weird.
It's just gross. It was an object that. So the episode doesn't allow you to inspect the the clones or what however we're describing them, but here they actually let you inspect it, and yet you come away
Right.
with no answers.
Yeah.
Which I feel like those things are going hand in hand. It was like, if you saw them up close, I don't know that you'd necessarily feel better or more concrete in your analysis of what these things actually are.
Yeah. It looks like a dead seal of some kind.
Yep.
Like, but that's kind of in a weird state of decomposition. Anyway, they arrive at the waterfall, which Milchick describes them as the tallest waterfall on the planet.
This is the tallest waterfall on the planet.
It's like,
This is like when you have kids, you can just tell them what the
You can
reality
just say
is.
whatever
you can
you
just say
want.
whatever you want, and they'll believe you because they haven't seen anything else. Like, have you done that with your kids, Patrick Klepek? Have you like said like
nothing like this is the tallest water? Like, it's such a funny lie to tell. But yes, you tell white lies to your children all the time, hopefully in good faith. But that one,
I remember
me up.
when I was young, my parents would tell me, like, if you turn on the light in the car while it's driving at night, they're like, you can't do that. It's illegal. You can't turn on the light in the car.
That's a good one.
It's illegal.
There was a great one my parents did with me where growing up, like one of the weird foods I was really into was like barbecue ribs, but from this very specific restaurant, because I got into them because I liked their sauce. And so my parents, when they would like make ribs on like for a Sunday night dinner, like, did you get the sauce from that place? Like, yes, of course. Like when I was out doing errands, I went there and I got the sauce. And I would eat the ribs happily. And then, of course, years later, my mom was like, I mean, like, I was not, you were just having sauce out of a bottle like everybody else. So it's like, really? I thought you weren't going to get me my special sauce every time. She's like, no, I think I did it the first time and then realized that was too much work.
Wow.
So we decided as a family, your father and I just decided to like pour you regular barbecue sauce and see if you noticed. And he didn't. So good for you. I was like, oh, all right.
Wow. Learning a lot about the history here, man.
Well,
It's
they were
beautiful.
right. I didn't notice the
Yeah.
difference, and it was fine.
He also says Kier's twin was always with him. That's why we've provided the same for each of you. Well, I guess that explains that. No further explanation needed. Anyway, they go to the camp. There are copious luxury meats. I'm disappointed at the lack of shots of the copious luxury meats. four ply washroom tissue. That's amazing.
Such a good line. Love it.
Amazing. Anyway, they hang out. They're by the fire. Milchick reads from the book and describes what happened to Dieter Egan. Apparently, Dieter Egan's eye came out. It popped from the socket, driven by a sudden torrent of pus from his skull. And basically, like, his brother died because he masturbated too much. And that's when Kier encountered the first temper. Whoa, a gaunt bride, half the height of a natural woman, end quote. That's a character who we'll see later on in the episode. Also, Miss Huang is apparently playing a theremin, I think is what's going on there, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, neat instrument.
So, yeah, very cool. All right. But throughout all this stuff, Irving is getting really suspicious of Heli and asking all the questions we had about what did you see during the overtime contingency? What's the deal with that gardener and so on? And if you're like my wife, she was cheering every time Irving spoke in this episode because Heli needs to get exposed.
It's
the
sign of a smart show, though. Like, there's this tension between the audience the audience being ahead, feeling like they're potentially ahead of the characters, and there's a dance that a good show can do of like elongating, making that tension.
Yes.
As opposed, and it's not slow walking it, or if it is, it's doing it with a purpose. And I feel that's what's been so rewarding about this season in particular, and this episode in particular. I cheer it from a storytelling point of view, because it's like you're doing all of the right things for like this kind of show. It's like you introduce something, you don't treat the audience like they're stupid, and you still resolve it in a way that feels fun and exciting and interesting. And it makes me just so excited for the rest of the show. It's like, all right, well, if you're handling it this way, I'm putting a lot of faith. I have a lot of faith in where all the rest of it can go.
Yeah. And it does make sense that it would be Irving as well, I think, in a lot of ways, because he is the character that most reveres the whole situation and is most heartbroken by how it all plays out. And like I think he's the one that would be the most emotionally volatile because of the events of the show.
He almost left, right? Like his
Yeah.
his illusion of self in many ways is shattered, and
Yeah.
so the reason he's here, well, he's looking for that purpose. Why am I still here with
Right.
these people? I could have
Yeah.
left, and I think he finds that purpose in this episode.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So Heli starts laughing at this story about how Dieter Egan died because of the masturbation, and then Milchick is really upset and throws the marshmallows away, and that upsets everyone. So
Why do you think she does that? Do you think it's to try and gain trust with like someone who is not a spy
right.
would kind of make fun at this like silly masturbation story that's being treated as biblical lore?
I think there's multiple possibilities, right? None of which I don't know which one is. Okay, so what is clear is Milchick knows that is Helena,
Yes.
right? That is a fact. So, so yeah, I think it's either she's trying to gain trust or she views the severance procedure as like going to Westworld, or not the severance procedure, but like being with the innies is like going to Westworld. I can just cut loose and show my real self. And maybe Seth is actually legitimately pissed. You know, I think that's very possible. So anyway, Milchick's not amused and they throw away the marshmallows, and he says marshmallows are for team players, Dylan. They don't just hand them out, which is really brutal. Really brutal.
Marshmallows are for team players, Dylan. They don't just hand them out.
Irving then
I'm going to tell
questions
that to my kids. I need to write that line. I'm going to write that line down.
Yes. By the way, I just want to say the outfits in this episode are incredible. Like all the innies are wearing black and Seth is wearing white, and it's like very striking looks. Irving questions Heli about the night gardener, and everyone then turns on him because he's kind of being an asshole. And Heli pushes back real hard and says, Irving's just sad he can't see Bert again and he's lonely. And Irving later realizes like that's not Heli. And I have to say, if you watch that scene, that character is not Heli. Like that is a very different.
Her
that is
face
not what Heli
changes.
The face changes. The tone of voice changes. The cadence of voice changes. It's actually quite remarkable. Then Mark and Heli make love. You know, Heli says she didn't like who she was on the outside, and he's like, "I don't care who you were on the outside. I just care who you are here."
Oh God, this is like such an upsetting scene.
Okay, so why is it upsetting to you? Because I think it's upsetting because because
of what happens. Like at the end, like it's in the totality of the episode. It's like
I think you could argue it's upsetting because like consent cannot actually be provided in this situation,
correct.
right?
Yes,
where Mark does not know who he's having sex with.
yes,
right. In a way,
yeah, that's it. Yeah, nailed it. 100%.
Yeah. So not great.
He did nothing wrong, and yet everything is wrong. Just a bad place to be.
Also, like he doesn't know that it's her. Okay, but also, Patrick, there was an open question of like, when does this episode take place? You know, did this happen before the events of last episode? I don't think that's true, because at one point when they're in the tent together, Mark sees flashes of Gemma.
My interpretation was that maybe it straddles or something. It's like, but yes, I don't think it's like set weeks before or months before.
My interpretation is this is post reintegration. Basically,
I agree.
Like, does this happen after Mark's reintegration or not? And the answer is post reintegration. And look, Patrick, he's his same old self. You see, so you don't need to be worried. It's still Mark in there, right? But anyway. Yeah, he sees like flashes of Gemma along with Heli, and so it implies that he is post reintegrated and struggling with the results of that. So this does seem to be after the events of last episode. Anyway, Irving sets out into the middle of the woods. He gets lost. He calls for Mr. Milchick. He falls down. He has a bad dream where he sees Bert. Then he sees the Temper Woe, who's also working in MDR, and then who kind of like attacks him at the end. He wakes up. And he goes and he finds Heli at the waterfall, and he sees Heli there, and he puts it all together. He says he figures out that it's not Heli because Heli is never cruel, right? And that's true. She would never be cruel like Helena is. And then he asks who would have the power to send their Audi to the severed floor, and then deduces that it is an Egan. So super badass.
Got him.
And then
Got him.
Heli's like doesn't even say anything. She's just like, I'm sorry. Like doesn't even have doesn't have an excuse. It's not prepared at all. And then Irving grabs her and he's extremely pissed and he asks Mr. Milchick. He starts screaming at Mr. Milchick, turn her back. She's an outie. She's been an outie since the first time she came back. She's an effing mole. I'm going to kill her. Which is like a really extreme reaction, I have to say. But
well, and I will say, I sat through the simulation theory. I feel like this breaks the simulation theory argument.
Why? Tell me that.
Well, everyone seems pretty concerned that she's actually going to fucking die.
Well, I don't know.
Maybe this is. Like,
I don't know if you know this, Patrick.
If you die in a video game, you can
you
die in real life.
life.
Yeah. So I don't know. I agree that things are off, and we may not have a holistic understanding of what's going on. But everyone seemed awfully concerned. There's some genuine concern from her and from Mr. Milchick that she might die.
Now, at one point in this episode, at one point in season 2, episode 4. Mr. Milchick makes a phone call or a walkie-talkie call, and he says, remove the Glasgow block.
Glasgow?
In season 1, when the innies are hacking into the system to activate the overtime contingency, we see a screen for all the severed employees, these severed functions, and one of them says Glasgow on them. The other ones are Beehive, Branch Transfer, Clean Slate, Elephant, and Freeze Frame. And I just like that all of those are actually really evocative names. Like you can kind of imagine what every single one of those might be. And Glasgow is one of them. Now, a lot of people were interpreting this to be on the Glasgow scale of coma, the Glasgow coma scale, which is a 15-point scale that measures a patient's eye, verbal, and motor responses. And so maybe like if you activate Glasgow, that like completely shuts the person down. I don't think that's accurate based on what we see in this episode. Like, it doesn't seem related to that. It just seems very clearly like they're maintaining the outie version of Helena. But I thought it was interesting that essentially the show introduced all these different, very cool, evocative names. And you again, branch transfer, you can imagine what that is. They're moving people to another branch, or clean slate. They're wiping everyone, like whatever it is. Glasgow is one of them, and they introduced it in season 1. They paid it off here. So they explain what the Glasgow situation is. So anyway, wanted to acknowledge that. Okay, so they bring Heli back. And I have more to say about that. I'll save that for the end about how they bring her back. But anyway, Mr. Milchick is very upset that Irving has tried to kill one of his coworkers and sentences him to death. He says him like, because you have threatened collegiate murder in this hallowed ground, you can no longer exist anymore. He says your workspace will be clear of any personal items discarded. Your file, including any and all professional interactions and personal relations, will be purged and destroyed. It will be as if you, Irving B., never existed nor drew a single breath upon this earth. May Kira's mercy follow you into the eternal dark. And presumably, that is the last we see of Irving B. in the show. Who knows?
Do you think that's true?
I don't know. I doubt it, but we'll see.
Anyway, what is it? What is he? What's the line he says? Like, keep hanging on.
Just remember, hang in there.
Yeah, something like that. He's like, keep.
That
hanging
feels
on.
like a phrase he might have seen in his vision. I feel like keep hanging on is going to be
keep hanging in there.
Keep hanging in there. That is going to be important in some way.
Anything else about this episode? Like, what was your reaction when you saw Irving B might be permanently outed?
It feels like a beautiful conclusion to that character, if that is the last we see of them. I think it's like wonderfully, like the sense of peace and sense of self and like purpose achieved for his time in this place. Like as he closes his eyes, like he's not scared about what's about to happen. He's like, I did a good thing. I helped my friends. I accomplished what I found meaning in a meaningless world. Like you're here to just to work, to just like, you didn't have a choice here. And yet you found purpose and friendship and family, and you helped them and saved a friend of yours. And I thought that was like really beautiful. And I think it's unlikely to be the way that they make it seem so final. Like you're just going to be erased. You're going to be gone. It's like in many things in Severance, I think it's more complicated than that. But if it is on face value, that's the end of it. Wonderful way for that character to come to a conclusion. It feels like a complete arc. But I'll admit that it makes me a little sad because I think the group will be lesser without him in it.
I'm going to tell you what came to mind during that last scene is that being laid off is an incredibly dehumanizing process, right? Like, and we see someone basically get laid off in this scene, and it really does feel like, your items will be cleared of your desk,
Your
and
email
the
is
file
turned
gone.
off.
When you, I remember when I was on at Microsoft, and we used to use this thing called Link. I think it was basically like the chat thing that we would use to talk to other people was called Link. I want to say, and then eventually became like Skype for Business, I think. Anyway, point being, you'd be talking to someone and it would show like, that they're in the office or they're away from their desk or inactive or whatever. And then if they ever got laid off and removed from the system, it would say presence unknown. And I just found that to be very creepy. If like somebody got laid off, it'd be like presence unknown or something, it'd be like, wow. Okay. And anyway, I just feel like when you're laid off from a job, it is a kind of death in a way, right? It is you a part, like a version of you that existed does die to the people who are at work, and it forever alters your relationship with them in a way that's like not something we think about very much, but it is profound. And I thought that the way this show shows, not how I expected to depict it, out in the middle of the woods where he's walking into, and by the way, his like Audi is now just in the middle of nowhere. Isn't that going to be like super disorienting for him? Anyway, who knows how that's going to play out? But I appreciated the kind of mini commentary on what it's like to lose your job.
Yeah.
Let's talk about elevator tones, Patrick Klepek.
Okay.
There's been some viral videos going around this week about what happens when innies go into the elevator in Severance. When someone goes into the elevator, you hear a tone G. Right? Like the notes, the note is a G. So you hear G. And then when the Audi becomes an innie and they get down to the severed floor, you hear C sharp. Right? So it goes G and then C sharp. From top to down. Here's how good this show Severance is that has been a motif that has been throughout the whole show. Like whenever someone makes a transition from Audi to innie, you hear those two tones in that order. This episode opens with Irving waking up and becoming his innie. Now, I will say that the tone you heard at the beginning of the episode, I believe, is G. So that does depart from what the show has done in the past. It is, because theoretically you're only supposed to hear G when the Audi is going in. But I think at the beginning of the episode, it is a G when Irving shows up, and that's his innie, presumably, unless there's some freaking twist and it's not his, innie. But like, and this is my understanding. And then at the very end of the episode, when Seth Milchick says, remove the Glasgow block, and then Helena becomes Heli R, there's two things that happen that indicate that transition has completed. One is whenever the show transitions from Audi to innie, the focal length of the camera changes. It's this thing where you can push the camera closer, but like make the focal length wider so that the person stays the same size, but the kind of dimensions of their face change a little bit. Like they look a little bit, more far away, more wide angle. It's hard to describe on a podcast, right? But hopefully, if you're watching the video, my editor John is showing this on screen. You see that happen on screen. You see the focal length of the camera change on Heli R's face, indicating that she has transitioned from her Audi to the innie, which is very cool. Because it happens underwater, and you usually don't see that underwater because you need to physically move the camera in order for that to happen. So I actually don't even know how they achieved it. My guess is they did CG for this, but I'm not sure. Like they could have figured out a way to like move the camera underwater. But typically it's not an underwater movement because
Right.
you need to physically push the camera in or pull it back. So that's something that happens this episode. Also, the tone that plays at the very end of the episode is a C sharp. So it is the tone that is typically reserved for when an outie becomes an innie. And all that stuff is all subconscious. The show doesn't explain any of that. The show doesn't say, by the way, whenever this, but you've been hearing it the whole show. You've been hearing these tones the whole show. That's how they showed that Helena became Heli R at the end of the episode. And it was super, super cool. So anyway.
That's cool. I have two small things before we get out of here. One, I was sort of surprised the show didn't remark upon this, but I assumed that this camping adventure is the first time that the innies have gone to sleep.
Oh, yeah.
Like they've never gone to sleep.
That's
like
right.
Naturally.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe
they dozed off at work sometime, but you're right.
But that's different than going to bed. And the action of going to sleep is like a process. And I just thought it was sort of,
also the first time some of the outies the innies have had sex before,
right? So there's instinctual things that sort of just take over, but I still thought it was like they've never actually had to just put themselves to sleep before. I thought that was kind of interesting. And then the other one that this episode really hammered home for me is, and part of it was it kind of crystallized for me with Helena. What we then know is Helena kind of cackling at the reading of this book is, this show is full of lore, right? Like in a very mystery box show, Lost, you'd go into a cave and it explains what was happening on this island, hundreds of years ago. And this show still gets to do that. It still gets to have really built out fantasy level lore, but it's all just bullshit. It actually doesn't matter. It matters in the sense of how this world is constructed, but it doesn't I don't think anything in this book is what it seems. And so it's they get to have the fun of the sweeping orchestral music plays as the mysterious cave invites our characters in, but actually it doesn't matter in the way that every other show that operates on that level is actually this cave is really important and means a lot, and we're about to learn a lot about the world here. And that it uses those motifs in cinematography and emotional weight for these characters, but it actually doesn't matter that much. And I just think that's it's a cool part of the show that it gets to play in both worlds. And I just really appreciate it.
Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.